My dad was everything to me. He was sweet.
My father, he was the strongest man I ever knew.
She was intrepid, fearless.
He was just a really kind man.
So my mom had big dreams for my future and my brothers.
It is important to memorialize them because we as a country are so willing to forget.
These huge numbers represent real people.
And having a National Memorial Day is a way for us to reach out to others.
Will be a day that we can all come together and just remember.
It's vitally important.
And that's why I'm marked by COVID.
And I am marked.
I am marked.
And that is why I'm marked by COVID.
Hi everyone, it's good to be with you to commemorate those whose lives have been affected by COVID-19. I want to thank everyone who volunteers with Marked by COVID for ensuring that we remember the loved ones we've lost and that we support those who continue to grieve for them. And I want to thank the essential workers who are still fighting on the front lines every day to protect their neighbors and their communities. COVID-19 took many lives. Over 1 million people died from COVID here in the United States, and millions more have lost family members, friends, loved ones, and neighbors. I know how it feels to lose someone you love to COVID, and so many Americans across the country know how that feels too. Our hearts hurt from everything and everyone that this pandemic has stolen from us. And that's why it is so important to have a day when we can come together as a community and remember the people we've lost and those who continue to be affected by the virus. It is also why I've introduced a resolution to create a National Memorial Day for COVID-19 victims and survivors on the first Monday of March, and I will continue to fight to pass it into law. The work that you do is so important. And I'm grateful to you for bringing us together as a community and as a nation, bringing us together to heal and to remember the lives we have lost through this pandemic. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Congressman Greg Stanton. Thank you all for joining this important event, and thank you to Marked by COVID for making this event so impactful. We have lost more than 1 million Americans to COVID, including nearly 33,000 here in Arizona. We feel the loss of parents, brothers, sisters, our friends, our colleagues every day. And so many missed out on the chance to traditionally mourn your loved ones. To keep as many people as safe as possible, so many of us did not get the chance to say a proper goodbye in person or even to hold funerals to celebrate our loved ones' lives. Marked by COVID knows how important it is to honor and memorialize those lost or impacted by this terrible virus. In partnership with them, I introduced a resolution in Congress to designate the first Monday in March as COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day. I want to recognize 2 advocates who have been instrumental in gaining support for this important effort. Kristin Urquiza and Tara Krebs. Both lost their fathers tragically to COVID-19. And they, along with so many others, have turned their grief into action. Their dedication inspires me. Recognizing COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day is an important marker for all of those affected by COVID-19. As we shift into a new phase of the pandemic, we still need to take the time to collectively grieve all of those we have lost and to help our country heal from this trauma. We need to let those who have lost a loved one or are still dealing with the long-term effects of COVID know that you are not alone. We see you, we hear you, and we will make sure that something like this never happens again. I will carry the memories of those we've lost with me as I continue my work. We need to honor those lost today, and we also need to honor the lessons learned in the pandemic. And I will continue to push for accessible health care, support for our community organizations, food security, support for our healthcare workers, pandemic preparedness, and so much more. So to all of you, thank you for your work, and thank you for having me say a few words today.
Over 6 million people have died from COVID-19 around the world. Over 1 million have died in the United States alone. And in our home state of Massachusetts, over 23,000 people have died from COVID-19 since March of 2020. Each person we have lost has left behind friends, family members, co-workers. Each person is an empty seat at a dinner table, a grandparent who won't be at a graduation or wedding, a best friend who won't be there to share in life's joys or sorrows. You know, the numbers may measure cases and deaths, but the human impact of the loss we have endured is devastating and immeasurable. I support the creation of a COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day to remember the lives lost to COVID-19 and honor those who have experienced great hardship over the last 3 years. While the conditions of the pandemic have improved, we cannot move on without recognizing what has changed and what we have lost. To move on, to heal, to recover, we have to honor what and who we have lost in this tragedy. In order to move forward, we have to remember. So thank you for your work to advocate for this powerfully important idea.
Hello, I'm Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts. Thank you to Marked by COVID for bringing us together to memorialize those we've lost to COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic, and for recognizing those living with long COVID. This is just such an important thing for us to stop and to recognize, because there are no words to fully capture the loss of the more than 1 million loved ones, partners, family members, friends, neighbors, due to COVID-19 up to right now. How do we grieve the uncelebrated anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, and other cherished moments that together make life's most meaningful memories? These losses are incalculable and deeply felt all across the country. So this is a very important thing, I think, to do, because tragically, this pandemic is not yet over. Not for the United States, not for the rest of the world. For the elderly and people with disabilities, the threat of COVID-19 remains a daily specter. And we have to center those communities in our response, in our planning, and in our messaging to ensure that we don't lose one more life to this virus unnecessarily. And so no family misses out on creating those special moments and memories with the people they love. There's still millions of people who are vulnerable, who are being told, just go back to normal. But for them, we have to continue to build in the protections. We have 30,000 new cases per week in the United States, and the number of families affected by the devastating impacts of COVID-19 and long COVID are growing. Millions of Americans continue to feel the lingering impacts for weeks, for months, and with long COVID, even for years, due to their experiences with long COVID. As many of you know, long COVID symptoms are as diverse as they are complicated and can be debilitating. So we've just got to continue to focus on this issue, because with both kids and adults experiencing long COVID, it may have huge impacts on our educational and healthcare systems, as well as our workforce. So we must also acknowledge and address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black, brown, indigenous, immigrant, and low-income communities. Our mission must be to confront and counter the injustices, racial and economic, in education and health, that this pandemic has made undeniable. We need to build fairness into this system. The intersectional injustices this pandemic has spotlighted extend from the crisis in our healthcare system to the planetary crisis of climate change. The communities that have and continue to bear the brunt of the COVID pandemic are the same communities that we hear of the greatest burdens of polluted air and rising temperatures. These communities are on the front lines of climate change and environmental injustice, which is why the fight for health justice and climate justice must be intertwined. Chelsea, Massachusetts, for example, in my home state, they already had high pre-existing asthma cases, and when COVID arrived, it made it even more dangerous. And I'm now the chair of the subcommittee on clean air and in the Senate and the Committee on Healthcare. I will continue to fight for a future where we all breathe easier, free from the devastation of COVID and long COVID, free from the harms of environmental injustice, free from all respiratory dangers that burden communities yearning to breathe free. So that's our assignment. I'm the chairman over climate change, the chairman over healthcare in the Senate subcommittees. And that's why I'm so proud to join you today in support of the COVID Memorial Day resolution, which sets aside the first Monday in March as a day to memorialize those lost to the pandemic, to recognize COVID-19 survivors and support those living with long COVID. We have to work together. We have to continue to be partners in Washington and back in local communities, fighting alongside each other to make sure that the halls of Congress actually respond so we have a healthier future for every one of us. Thank you for doing God's work here on earth.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeanette Nunez del Prado. I'm the New Mexico Marked by COVID Hub leader, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about the New Mexico COVID-19 Memorial. I lost my dad to COVID in May of 2021, just 2 weeks before he was going to get vaccinated and meet his grandchildren for the first time. I will share my screen now so you guys can all see pictures of the memorial and help breathe some life into the idea. All right. Okay, so we have partnered with Bernalillo County Parks and Rec on this project, along with landscape architect Kim Romig. It began in June of 2021 when a month after I lost my dad to COVID, I wrote a letter to the editor saying that we need a COVID-19 memorial, and that helped me to connect with Marked by COVID. And last summer, I partnered with a longtime community activist, Eleanor Bravo, who lost her sister to COVID, and from there, it has really taken off. We have a diverse steering committee made up of impacted community members, such as Native American leaders, healthcare members, LGBTQ members, as well as members of the disability community. We've passed 4 local resolutions throughout the state in support of the memorial. And we have a senator who introduced a memorial into state legislature, which expresses support for the designation of a COVID-19 memorial. And we have just finished lobbying for funding from the state legislature. We're asking for $2 million, and soon we will know the outcome of those efforts. It will be located in Albuquerque on 1 acre of public trust land with views of our beautiful terrain and mountains. The design was inspired by our rich cultures and traditions in New Mexico, and we have a pilgrimage walk in Chimayo, which is the largest pilgrimage in the United States, as well as many ofrendas or offerings that you'll find of remembrances throughout the state. So the proposed design is on an acre of land, and it begins with a node representing more personal or private reflections of grief. And the pilgrimage walk is filtered by papel picado walls. It will have nichos or small shelves and gardens in key areas, culminating at the end, which is a space for societal expressions of grief and communal healing. This is a perspective where you can see the papel picado walls. And at the end is where you get to the stone plinth, which has the augmented reality digital component of the memorial. So visitors can hold up their phones and see the faces and names of those who've died of COVID, curated by survivors and those who loved them. We've partnered with Snapchat, who is helping us to design this. And this here you can see it in the context of the larger memorial. It's very fitting to have a digital component, as many of us had to say goodbye to our loved ones on Zoom. We're robbed of in-person farewells, and it will help us to reclaim our cell phones as devices of healing and social connection. People have grown numb to the number of deaths, so giving names and faces to the numbers will help to humanize the losses. This is us in the Capitol. We've met with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who's fully in support of the project, wants to do what she can to help, as well as other lawmakers. And here's us down at the bottom with the fellow COVID bereaved lobbyists who shared our stories to help compel lawmakers to allocate their capital outlay. Thank you all so much. Please email me, Jeanette@markedbycovid.com for information to get more involved, or if you have any questions. And we'll also include a link if you would like your loved one included in the memorial. Anyone can submit a remembrance. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'll just begin. 1 million Americans are gone, lost to us forever. Our mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, and neighbors. Our husbands, wives, and children taken from us, taken from this planet while stripped of their dignity and grace. Empty chairs left behind mirror the void left in our hearts. In their absence, we were robbed of mourning them. Services were not held, ashes were not scattered, loved ones were ungathered. I'm Carly. I lost my dad on April 28th, 2020. He was released from the hospital too soon and died in my home 4 days later. I had checked on him at 4 a.m., turned up his oxygen, and told him to get some rest, and I loved him. Those were the last words that he ever heard. Shortly after he passed, I joined Marked by COVID and vowed to honor him. I vowed not to stop until his life, as well as the 1 million fellow Americans lost to COVID, are memorialized. Our loved ones deserved better and more, and we must continue to fight for them. Today, I take the opportunity to honor the individuals we lost by using quotes taken from members of our community as we collectively struggle together in our unique grief. Quote, "I'm so tired. I'm tired of being sad. I'm tired of being angry. And honestly, I'm tired of caring so much. But I do, and I have to keep on going on. I miss my dad so much." Tara from Arizona. Quote, "Yesterday was a rough day for me. In fact, it was awful. The one person I wanted to speak with wasn't even here." Fiona from New Jersey. Quote, "Yesterday and today have been intermittent crying days. I miss her. I need a hug from her. I also wish I had valued those hugs more when she was here. Angela from Missouri. Quote, grief, like the ocean, can come in waves. Sometimes the water is calm, flowing, and sometimes it's overwhelming. All I can do is learn to swim. Rima in New Jersey. I never got to say goodbye. There are so many things I still needed to tell him. He didn't have access to the vaccine. He didn't get to meet his grandkids. He died scared and alone. Now I feel like most people around me don't understand what it means to lose someone to COVID, and they equate it to a typical loss. But it's not. It's really hard, and I feel so traumatized and alone. Janet from New Mexico. Quote, it's not like usual grief, which in itself is debilitating. My mom slowly suffocated to death, alone in the ICU for 2.5 weeks, while the world debated COVID-19. Everyone feels like they have the right to speak about our losses. It's painful. Their deaths were preventable and politicized. Jennifer from Massachusetts. Quote, there is no end to the grief. It changes, it morphs into something different, but it's ongoing. Lucy from California. Quote, it just doesn't make sense. I feel like it wasn't supposed to end like this. Vanessa from Florida. Quote, COVID changed my life forever. 24 weeks, 148 days, 1:59 a.m. Carolyn Edmondson, I love you. I miss you. Rodney from Georgia. Quote, I want my world back. I'm not the same person without my mom. Rosanna from New York. Quote, I feel like I'm in a nightmare and haven't woken up yet. Dale from Alabama. Quote, I still can't believe this is real. Noble from Mississippi. Quote, we cannot forget them. We must not. I will not let us. Kristin. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
My dad was Randy. He was intelligent, kind, musical, and he knew every scientific name of every imaginable bird and tree. I was blessed to have him as my father for 45 years. He had just recently retired from a successful career of almost 40 years. He was just starting to live out his dreams. My dad was misled by disinformation about COVID-19 and the vaccination and became sick with it right before Christmas 2021. He died just 4 months ago after laying alone for 12 days, suffering in ICU alone. His daughters and granddaughter watched as he perished from the screens of our phone, as I know many of us did. I am still in shock. I am heartbroken, and I am angry. How? Why? Unanswered questions. I'll probably never have the answers to them. Connections such as these tonight are what get me through and give me strength. Sharing our stories connects us all in healing, removes the isolation that is so heavy upon us, and helps to protect our vulnerable hearts. For this reason, I am working with a dear friend and my daughter in sharing our story in the form of a documentary film named I'm Still Here, Love. One of the last lucid texts I ever received from my dad said, I'm still here, love. It wasn't very long after that he died. But he's not here. COVID stole him. He will live on through his children and grandchildren in all of the knowledge and love that he shared with us, in the fact that my daughter can play the guitar because he taught her, in the dimple on my son's chin and in mine. He will live on. And in that way, it's like he's here, but he's not, and he should be. My hope is to heal and push for change so that history like this never repeats itself again, so that future generations do not have to experience loss in this disgusting, grotesque way. If you would like to view the trailer and some pictures of my dad, please visit imstillherelovefilm.com. I'll share that in the chat. We would love to have people support our efforts as we push out a film to connect with people who feel alone like I do, like you do, and also fight back against the organizations that misled our loved ones.
Thank you. Marie Wright.
Good evening. I have a picture here of my husband. I don't know if you can see it. That's he and I about 5-6 years ago. Just a little overview, if I could. My husband went into the hospital on December, the week right before Christmas on a Sunday. He was not feeling good. At that time, the hospitals were very full, so he was not very, very sick, so they sent him home. On January 3rd, he could not breathe very well. He was having difficulty, and we brought him back to the hospital, to the emergency room. And that was the last time I ever saw him. He went into the hospital, and then on January 18th of 2021, he passed away. I would like to just give you a little bit about what Michael was and who he was as a person, if I could. Michael was a successful executive. He designed and implemented valuable business models still in use today. He was a true leader, knowledgeable, confident, and well-respected. Michael passed away on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January 18th, 2021. And this was just about 2 months before the vaccine became available. As he was keenly interested in current events and had a deep belief in equality and fairness of his fellow citizens, this date was so fitting. Michael was a dreamer and a visionary. He was always developing new ideas and programs to help people achieve their aspirations. It was his hope that in the near future, everyone has the opportunity to develop the skills to excel in life. Originally from Hilton Head, South Carolina, Michael enjoyed a love of fishing, golf, music, and the beach. Michael was an extrovert, always optimistic, outgoing, and had a great love of life. Strong in his faith in the Lord, he believed in the power of love and welcomed friendships of all people. He was a true gentleman and made sure to treat others with respect also. His presence filled a room, and his quick smile, sharp wit, loud laugh, and compassionate nature radiated to people and animals alike. Michael's larger-than-life personality will be forever missed. And I would like to now conclude by reading a poem. I thought of you today. I thought of you today, but that is nothing new. I thought of you yesterday and to tomorrow too. I think of you in silence and make no outward show. For what it means to lose you, only those who love you know. Remembering you is easy. I do it every day. It's the heartache of losing you that will never go away. In loving memory of my husband, Michael, thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Jim Keating. I'm from New Jersey, and I lost my wife, Debbie, of 42 years on March 27th, 2021. We were married for 42 years. It was just horrible. Debbie didn't want to go to the hospital. She fought and fought in her room, trying to fight it herself. But finally, we had to call an ambulance for her because her oxygen level was down to 64. She didn't want to go to hospital because my daughter's friend's mother just passed away a month prior in the hospital. So she didn't want to go to hospital to die. She kept on saying, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I had no idea that when I put her in the ambulance that day, that was going to be the last time I seen her. But she went to the hospital and she kept on texting. She couldn't talk to us because she had that big mask on. But we would text every day and said she would fight for her family so hard, and she was fighting and fighting. But every day was just getting worse and worse. And finally, on the 17th of March, they had to put her on a ventilator, and she knew what they were doing, and she gave a thumbs up because she didn't want to die. She didn't want to die. So that was the last time we had any communication with Debbie. So from that day on, the nurses there, they would put the phone by Debbie's ears because they say that they can still hear even though they're in a coma. So we would talk to Debbie every day that way. But every day we would get a phone call from the doctors and nurses that things were just getting worse and worse. Finally, my daughter and my son, we knew that it was time, that it was just getting too rough to Debbie. It was 25 days. She was just fighting and fighting. Just every organ in her body was just shutting down. It was getting worse and worse. Finally, we put her phone to her ear on the 27th of March, and we said, Debbie, you fought as hard as you could, Deb. You fought as hard as you could, but it's time to go, Deb. It's time to go. Your mother's waiting for you up there. God's waiting for you. Within a couple hours later, Debbie passed away. She went into heaven. That's the type of woman she was. She needed to hear that from us, that it was okay to go, because she fought so hard for us. She didn't want to go, but we told her it was all right. It was so hard. We were supposed to do so many things. We had so many things to do. I just like to share a picture of my wife now. And I like to share a song that every time I hear, I think of my wife. So let me put this song on. Hold on.
Didn't know today would be our last, or that I'd have to say goodbye to you so fast.
Hi, I'm Lisa Smid. I lost my longtime significant other, Benjamin Schaefer, on April 28th, 2020. It was a day after his 58th birthday. He was a New York subway conductor, but not just any subway conductor. He was a transit expert, an author, a photographer who documented the New York rails and barges for over 40 years. He was a volunteer police officer for 28 years. Besides being a conductor for 22 years, he was a union shop steward and a union vice chair at the end of his life. And he was also active politically and in a lot of community organizations. His plan had been to run for city council in Brooklyn. Well, what I brought today, I've written a poem that I'm going to read for you. This one is called Brooklyn Queens Expressway. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes,
All right.
you can.
Brooklyn Queens Expressway. My Brooklyn boy is dead and buried in Queens. Born and raised amidst Midwood, Brooklyn, but carefully quarantined forever in Ridgewood, Queens, on the other side of the racing expressway. The graveyard is such a gatekeeper, visiting hours of a ship-shaped medical center. Everything in order, here's his place in it, his allocation. Like the hospital he last was at, there's a record of him as an occupant of sleeping quarters. Yet nobody can tell me where exactly Brooklyn Boy is now, or how exactly Brooklyn Boy's doing. Any answer I want is all in the records. Sorry, not our department. He's around here somewhere. This bald mound of earth in Queens is where they last left him, down the road from the great-grandfather he's named after, both grandmothers, one unnamed stillborn that could have been either an uncle or aunt. One great aunt, dead at 22, her marker the gnarled shape of a tree trunk cut down too soon. We can't regenerate this, what's been truncated. We can't undo this at all. We can't sweat this out, wait this out, purge this out, and then do a swap to make sure what shook us to our core is truly gone. Brooklyn boy can't Houdini his way out of his wooden box, break free from his white shrouds, claw his dirty way upward, burst forth from the earth, feel his way to the cemetery exit, and catch the next B-13 bus back to Brooklyn. If he makes it back that far, he'll find that the city he helped move has moved on without him. Moved on without waiting on me either. There's no express to wherever I might escape, no expedient answer to what I want now. Like Brooklyn boys always ask, what do you want from my life? This is where his story last left off. I'm stretched out over his mound, on top of him now, nose to the ground, ear to the earth, everything akimbo, all possible bases covered. He's around here somewhere. Yet though he's directly below me, we cannot give what each other's got in the 6 feet span. No virus can plague him now. Whatever took hold of him, it can't hurt me. And whatever I've got in me now can't hurt him. He's around here somewhere, Brooklyn boy, 6 feet downward, socially distanced for good. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristin Urquiza, and I'm the co-founder of Marked by COVID, the grassroots movement of COVID bereaved people behind COVID Memorial Day. Thank you so much for your participation in our 3rd annual Vigil to mark our losses from this horrific virus. I'm here right now because on June 30th, 2020, my dad, Mark Urquiza, passed away from COVID. A nurse whose name I would later learn is Dragana held his hand because we couldn't be by his side. And he was one of 85 people to die in Arizona that day, bringing our losses up to what seemed at the time an unimaginable 3,638 people gone in the state. In Arizona, we're now at 33,076 deaths and 1,122,164 people gone nationally. At least that's what the official count is. To experience this loss while so many others were returning to normal due to misinformation was unimaginable. In the days following my dad's death, I told our story over and over again to dozens of media outlets. Others reached out because they wanted to connect and share their stories too. And then Joe Biden himself talked about my family at a campaign event in Wilmington, Delaware. And I was floored to hear my name come out of his mouth. Later that week, scrolling through Instagram, I saw Fiona's mom on all of the president's campaign social media accounts. That public recognition of their deaths mattered. It helped carry our burden and the responsibility we felt to warn others. Knowing that strangers cared made our loved ones feel less disposable. Every other COVID bereaved person needs that. We have millions of COVID bereaved people just like me, and each of us deserves the same recognition I've deserved. While we can't all speak at the Democratic National Convention, we can all be recognized with things like COVID Memorial Day. Almost 1 year ago today, I read an interview where TV icon Oprah Winfrey told Los Angeles Times reporter Marissa Evans, quote, "I am appalled I am stunned. I don't recognize a country where you've lost nearly 1 million people and there hasn't been some form of remembering that is significant. She was half right. There are thousands of grassroots memorials, so many so that we're about to launch a crowdsourced matrix to document them all. But what is still missing, as Oprah so aptly pointed out, is that these efforts have been largely isolated within the COVID bereaved community, occasionally with the support of civilian allies. President Biden held a memorial event on the eve of his inauguration. The COVID bereaved community said it was healing. But despite that beautiful event, no sitting president nor governor has met with a delegation of the COVID bereaved. And I've got to say, I'm with Oprah. I'm appalled by our collective forgetting. And so are the thousands of COVID bereaved people that I've met through this work. Recognition of my loss and assurance that my dad's death was not in vain fundamentally transformed my grief journey. I was able to turn pain into purpose and launch this movement. Now, I'm fighting on behalf of each and every one of my siblings in grief who deserve similar recognition and healing. I know that we know how to do this. In the beginning of the pandemic, we clapped for healthcare and essential workers every night at 7 p.m. We social distanced to protect one another. When the COVID death toll reached 100,000, the New York Times ran a front page story stating the losses were incalculable. But when we reached 1 million deaths, crickets. And I couldn't understand why the country's interest seemed to wane as the death toll continued to grow. Shouldn't we care more and not less? Yes, that was the clear response from the COVID bereaved community. We should absolutely care more. Again and again, meeting after meeting, survey after survey, community members identified recognition as a consensus-winning top priority. And so for the last 3 years, we've gathered on the first Monday of March to observe COVID Memorial Day, remember our loved ones, and support one another in our grief and our healing. And every year, we invite allies and upstanders to join us in bearing witness and help shoulder our burden. We've championed COVID Memorial Day resolutions in more than 180 cities and in 9 states. And this year, for the very first time, a governor is attending one of our events. I am so grateful to Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs for being with us here today in Arizona. But we're not nearly done. The U.S. has come a long way in acknowledging that your zip code should not define your quality of life. And given our patchwork of support for COVID Memorial Day, our zip codes are still defining our quality of death. Whether you are honored and mourned as a part of a state or a nation's losses, or treated like the collateral damage of a natural disaster. That's why I'm thrilled to announce that Representative Stanton and Senator Warren have just introduced federal legislation that would enshrine this sacred day into law and unite the country in observance of COVID Memorial Day each and every year for generations to come. President Biden famously stated, "To heal, we must remember." And if we want to heal as one nation, we must remember as one nation. And so today I have a plea on behalf of my estimated 9 million COVID bereaved siblings in grief directly to President Biden. Mr. President, we did all that we could during the worst moments of our lives to make sure we had a leader in the Oval Office who would ensure that we remember and heal as one nation. We must also take concrete steps to ensure that the passage of time does not write out our stories into the national narrative. We know it's important to be together in solidarity and witness firsthand the wake of any destruction. When buildings fall, towns burn, and hurricanes demolish, presidents sit with our pain, embrace our orphan children, and look survivors in the eye. It signals to the nation that it's time to grieve, that we won't leave those most harmed behind in recovery. Please meet with COVID bereaved people, as you have so often met with other disaster victims, to hear our stories directly and show us and the nation that you care. And then take concrete steps to make sure that the bereaved have what we need to recover, including publicly supporting our efforts for an official COVID Memorial Day. Me telling my story and sharing the complexity of emotions associated with a COVID loss, and the world listening, gave others permission to tell theirs. COVID Memorial Day does the same thing, but this time for everyone. And to all of our upstanders and people in the United States, we are in a crucial moment between remembering and forgetting, honoring or disposing, learning from or repeating past mistakes. And though not everyone has the power of the Oval Office, each and every one of us has the ability to be an upstander somehow. We all have a superpower that we can use right now in this fight. Solidarity comes in many forms. I encourage you to donate a contribution to Marked by COVID. You could also listen to a friend's experience and then create a college course on COVID grief. You can volunteer to use some of your policy writing skills to help us draft further legislation. Or you could just sit beside a childless parent and hold their hand as they weep. Solidarity is simply turning care into action in the same way that we've turned pain into purpose. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here in solidarity with us today. Please keep listening to our stories and asking how you can best show up for us. We can only do this together. Thank you.